Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Washington. I am the National New Play Network producer in residency at Actors Express. And welcome to Raising the Curtain, Ableism in Theater. So, Raising the Curtain, it's a reminder, it's a promise that as we return to in-person theater, that around a year ago, we said we were going to make or be very intentional with equity, diversity, and inclusion on our stages, but also behind the scenes. So, this series is a reminder of that promise for us to keep going in our work towards more equitable, diverse, and inclusion spaces. Ableism in theater. If theater is a reflection of all society, then we have to make sure all voices are heard on stage and also behind the scenes. So today we have actors and administrative people, possibly, I think, yes, and writers. Rebecca, you're a writer, who represent the different areas of the disability community with us. So, we'll do some introductions, starting with Jessie.
Hi, y'all. I'm very stoked to be here. I'm coming from the East Coast. I'm currently in New York, but I toggle between the city and New Haven, Connecticut, where I'm finishing up my master's in acting at Yale School of Drama. And I use she, her pronouns, and an image description of myself is that I'm a small, white, disabled woman with, dark, long hair and wearing red lipstick, and I am an actor who uses a wheelchair. And not only do I like moonlight at Yale, but sometimes I do some acting work. Like people actually pay me to do it. I was last on Law and Order SVU. I've done a stint on Speechless on ABC. I have made a short film with the person that I am about to throw this to, David Harrell, as well as predominantly a stage actor, as well as I make a lot of my own work, living around disability and sexuality and disability and humor and what it means to exist in a body that is pretty inconspicuous. So I'm going to pass this to David Harrell.
Thank you for the pass, Miss Jessie Yates. Hi, my name is David Harrell, and I use he, him, his pronouns. A description: I am a middle-aged white man. I have some graying temples with black hair. I'm currently using a virtual background of a theater. I like to pretend this is the little theater I built that I just do, and I hang out and do Zooms on. But it's a virtual background with red seats of a theater. I'm wearing a red shirt with white flowers, kind of a Hawaiian shirt with a white T-shirt. As Jessie sort of mentioned, I'm also an actor with a disability. I was born without my right hand. I'm holding it up. I have a left hand with a little wedding ring. And then also my right hand was not developed. I have a small hand sort of ended just above my wrist, and I have 5 little small fingers. I call them nubs or nubbins that did not fully develop. So I am a congenital person. I identify as a congenital amputee, also as a person with limb difference. And so I've been an actor for a while. I've been in New York. I did some theater regionally. I lived in Atlanta, actually. Went to grad school with Freddie Ashley. Shout out, #ActorsExpress. So Freddie and I have been on stage together and have done some work. I did a lot of theater in Atlanta for a while, and I sort of moved around. Finished my MFA at University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Moved to New York City, and I was there for about 13 years. Was able to do a good bit of stage work, some film and television work. I just did a stint on FBI Most Wanted, a little co-star, and then I just got an opportunity to work on a new show on HBO called The Gilded Age, which was a lot of fun because it was a period drama, or I guess drama. And then I also do some advocacy work. I was able to work for an organization in New York called Inclusion in the Arts. We advocated for full diversity and inclusion in theater, film, television. We did have a disability access project where we kept a database of actors with disabilities, and we're able to provide information to casting professionals and producers and directors around the country to help cast disability authentically as best we can, and then also to have the conversation of disability being part of the broader scope of diversity. So when we talk about non-specific characters, that those characters could be performers with disabilities, even if the disability is not inherent in the script or character description. So that was sort of the work that we were doing in New York till about 2017, and I'm still trying to work a little bit with that advocacy with other organizations as well. And I'm going to pass it to Eric Grace. I'm going to pass the intro.
I got
it.
Oh,
look at that.
What's up? My name is Eric Grace. I am an actor. I identify with he, him, and his pronouns. I'm a double leg amputee. You can't see my prosthetics right now, but I'm sitting in a chair, wearing a burgundy hoodie, got a little fro going on, or or a high top, I guess is what they used to call them, in the day. And I'm a biracial boy. And some of the stuff that I've done, I played King on Step Up High Water. I've played Logan on Lock and Key, Ezekiel, the fabulous Ezekiel on Teenage Bounty Hunters. Rest in peace to that show. And I've also done a play reading with Jesse. I thought it was a film at first, and I remember, no, it was a play reading that we did together in New York. And David and I have ran in similar circles, and I've also benefited from his program. Have not had the chance to work with Rebecca, but I'm hoping for that one day. I used to be an intern at Actors Express. I was brought on by the fabulous Freddie Ashley, and I also was a casting associate as well at Actors Express at one point. But yeah, I think I covered it. And I got my BA from the University of West Georgia, currently in Toronto at the moment, and super glad to be here. Yeah. Oh, and I'm passing it to Rebecca.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I should just go anyway. All right, I'm Rebecca Jackson, artist, and I'm an actor, writer. I'm a playwright as well as a screenwriter, and I'm a filmmaker, producer. I produce theater as well as film. I've been doing that for 22 years. Yeah, like 22 years now. I'm old. So I have my own web series, Totally Becky. I have one of my short films called In the Midst of Morons, all that you can access on YouTube. I performed on the main stage at Second City long time ago, before Second City really acknowledged Black people. Okay, I said that. Oh my God. And then I've mainly, like, most of my work is comedic. For some reason, I've always wanted to be a serious actor, but the world wants me to make people laugh. And so, like, I'm like, oh, fine, okay. So that's what I've done. I've done other work. I've worked on like many stages in Chicago, a couple stages in LA. And I did film and television a lot in my 20s. So I'm not even gonna go back because like a lot of you guys were like, what's that show? And what it is, I took 9 years off to be a full-time mom. And so I taught theater and I taught acting and writing. And then in 2016, I realized that I had to go back full time to be professional because, anybody who works this profession, sometimes this is more than just a profession, it's a calling, like it's a spiritual calling. And sometimes you can look up and you're like, I don't understand why I'm clinically depressed. Oh, I'm not performing. So, but the reason why I'm here is because I'm a caregiver. I am an only child, and my dad passed away in 2003. My mom and I are super close, but in 2009, my mom had a massive stroke, and it completely changed the person she is. And then she had a second stroke in 2019, which then exacerbated her dementia. So not only is she a stroke survivor, but she has dementia. And just navigating now these performance spaces with having a mother who I have to care for around the clock, so that's why I'm here. And I think that's it, Amanda. Oh, wait. I'm one of 4 women who started Film Noir. Oh, and I'm on the board for Women's Theater Festival. Oh, yeah, that. Okay. And then I started Film Noir with 3 other women, one of them being Amanda. And we created a space for Black women in theater and to expand those spaces. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Thank y'all so much for those introductions. All right.
Mm-hmm.
First question of the night. Okay, so for whoever's watching, and if you watched last week, I always prep the panelists because I don't want them to come up with surprises. Amanda doesn't like surprises, so I don't think anyone should have to be surprised in such a manner with questions, at least, especially when they're live. All right, so first questions first. What stigma do you think the theater community needs to shed about the disability community? Okay. Do I need to give y'all more? Or?
Who wants to go? Eric is prepping.
I feel like I'm pitching a little bit to say, I guess to start off, I know I have something that comes to mind. I think one of the things I think is a big stigma is that accessibility is somehow something for people with disabilities. But I disagree with that. I think accessibility is purely just a human thing that we need to be including all humans, and people with disabilities don't have to be special in that ranking. So yeah, I think one of the things that I think theaters should get in their brains is that when you are creating an accessible space, you're not creating it for people with disabilities or for that one actor that's coming into your show or potentially coming into your show. You're creating an accessible space for everyone that should be accessible all of the time. If you ask an actor with a disability questions about accessibility, I think we should ask all actors about questions about accessibility. We make assumptions about people's abilities, and we may be wrong in that, or an actor may have different abilities from the audition to showing up to the first rehearsal or mid-show, so yeah, that's one of the things that I would love for people to get out of their heads, is that accessibility somehow has to do with people with disabilities and not just humans.
I would, just to kind of echo what you said, Eric, I agree. I think that's, I would like to see accessibility sort of broadly included within the DEI sort of conversation. So we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Because I think I agree, the accessibility is not specific to just the individuals with disabilities. There are many, many access points that all of us as human beings are going to benefit from, whether that's having better signage in our theaters, if that's having ramps instead of just stairs. A lot of folks are going to benefit from that, not just someone with who is a wheelchair user. So I think you're right. I think it's the stigma, I would say, is sort of what we're talking about, which is the ableism, which is the idea of value that we're putting on an individual. And I think the sort of the preconceived notions that, number one, I think that theater that have existed in theater for a long time, is that any access point, any accessibility is front of house. And that's where the conversations have been. That's where the conferences have been for years and years and years. I think we need to sort of break that stigma and open up the whole space. So when we talk about access, when we talk about diversity, we talk about equity and inclusion, we're bringing the whole building in there. It's backstage. It is on the in front of the lights. It's working the lights. It's the stage manager. It's also the audience too. So I really want to see that that sense of access is put into the DNA of the DEI work that's being put out there. So we're adding that A into it of accessibility, right? So it's DEIA. I think that's what's important, and that has to come from the top down in the theater. That has to come from the leadership, that all sort of departments are really looking through that lens.
Yeah, I mean, good design is good design. Usability is good usability, and everyone benefits from that. A thing that I am kind of coming up against, especially now as I've spent 3+ years training, and then I'm going out into the real world, is there's this assumption that disability or shows or festivals revolving around disability means less rigor within the work. And I mean, I've spent 3 years doing the same program as everyone else at Yale, but it is the assumption that when I come in the room, the work is going to be somehow less fleshed out, less nuanced, and oftentimes that comes into me with the jobs that I'm presented with. It's that I'm presented with characters that are exclusively their disability, so they're not people. And I think it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. It's the expectations that are placed on our community, particularly as artists, that we're somehow going to be doing a job that is subpar. And so therefore, the only thing that we can do, or the only way that we can serve a story, is by being the representational politic in the room, by our bodies existing merely as like, so that people in the world can see themselves, but they're not fleshing out those bodies. They're not making them people. They're not making them characters. They're not challenging I am only speaking from my own perspective, but my artistry. And it's a real bummer, because there are a lot of really talented disabled people out there, disabled artists, and they're not getting to show their stuff. They're not getting to stretch, and the way that you get better is by stretching yourself. So I would really love to see that change in the next couple of years, and I think it is slowly. I think we have artists like Ryan Haddad making his own work, also being on The Politician, doing something that doesn't have to do with disability. Ryan O'Connell, the other Ryan with CP, like has his own show on Netflix that is nuanced and messy and amazing, and the more we keep seeing stories like that, the more I think it will change. But it's happening in media before it's happening in theater.
I would love to go, please.
No, please, you go. Flow of conversation.
I would love to add on to that. I love what Jessie said about the work not changing once at PWD or someone with a disability, or however anyone defines. That's another thing we also identify differently in this community. So I personally identify as a PWD, but that once a person with a disability comes into the room, that suddenly somehow the work changes. I think as a dancer, I mentioned that as well. I do dance and have done a lot of dance work with people with disabilities. And the thing that I've learned is that a lot of these, and I was in a company called Four Radius Dance, which I featured 50%, thanks, Jesse, 50% people with disabilities and 50% of people who didn't. And the thing that you learn quickly is that we're having the same exact conversations. You know, I may translate it differently, or what they like to call it is transposing. When you transpose something, it's the same song, you're just changing the key. And I think that was something that really flipped in my head as a dancer, because I was able to go, okay, what are some of the things that are important in dance? Line, repetition, but these are the same things that you would do with a person with a disability. But I think a lot of times that some people who may not be used to working with people with disabilities, especially like in something as body oriented as dance, they need to go, oh, I don't know what to do with you. And it's like, well, you've always known what to do. What's looked good? You know, when you see that line, when you see that repetition, when you see that flow, when you see that rhythm in other dancers, how can we incorporate that with my body? And how can we create that circle with my body? How can we create, you know, so it's that kind of thinking of, I think, that's not my term at all. I don't know if Douglas Scott of Four Rated Dance coined that, but I think transposing is such a beautiful way of saying it, because you're taking the same training, you're taking the same everything, you're just transposing into a different body. And honestly, able-bodied people already do that. You know, able-bodied people don't come in the same package, you know? So it's something that able-bodied people do naturally for some reason, when we see an artist with a disability, we kind of assume that, oh, this needs to be different or other than what we've been doing.
That leads me to my next question. How do you all market yourselves then as artists, or when you're submitting? Because Jesse, you mentioned how I believe that's something similar to the jobs that are sent your way. It's affected by the fact that you are in a wheelchair. Like, so how do you all market yourselves? Like, do you tell people, yes, I am a PWD? I think that's how you said it. Eric, yes, person with a disability? Or is it like, look, I'm Eric. Nothing else you need to know. Have a great day. Both, I think, are acceptable. Or I'm not in the community. Let me be quiet.
Jesse, did you?
I mean, I really think it depends on my mood. It depends on the project. I think the thing that I've started to do in marketing myself is be really clear what projects I'm willing to take and what projects I don't want to use my body to tell. Because, you know, a story can end, right? A play can end, and if that narrative is insulting or is hurtful or is not a way that I see my disabled existence, I'm left with that. So if it's something that 3 months down the line, I'm still regretting having to say those lines. I'm regretting having to talk about my body as a pity, as a tragedy, as a conflict. I say no. So I'm more at a place where I say no, and that's how I market myself, by making sure that I have integrity over what I'm choosing to embody. And unfortunately, that means you turn down work. And I can only do that because I have the stability of school right now. And that'll change in the next year. And it really sucks that we would have to turn down the ability to pay our rent because the only stories that we're being asked are ones that don't align with us. But I think the only way that I can market myself as authentically as I want to, as Jessie and a disabled person. I'm proud of my disability. I'm proud of the way that I move through the world using my chair. I think it's cool. It's like opened my imagination. But the only way that I can do that and lead with Jessie, who's in a chair, who's also good at what she does, is if I'm integritous about what I'm saying is worth my time. and it's hard.
Mhm.
It's not easy. And I think, going around the room, I heard everyone say that they were multi-hyphenate artists. And I think there's something about being a disabled person or a person with a disability or a performer with a disability that kind of necessitates that, because the stories that we're getting told or we're getting asked to tell aren't always the ones that we want to be telling, so we have to make our own. And I think that both strengthens our community, because everyone I know in the disabled community has either a solo show or has written or has directed or has done something else as well, is because we're so thirsty to name ourselves as opposed to being named for and by the able-bodied population. So I don't know if that answers your question. I market myself as, I lead with my training, because my training will get me in the room more than get me into the rooms that I want to get into, rather than into the rooms that I feel like I'm being used as a token for. So that is how I do that. I'll throw this to you, Eric, or whoever wants to answer, but it seemed like you had a thought.
I did. I'll be honest, I'm still struggling with it. It's definitely an ongoing battle with me on a daily basis. I think Jesse said it right. Like it depends on how I woke up that day, where I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'll play whatever you want. I'm hungry, and I'm an actor who wants a resume, and I will do whatever. And then other times, yeah, I've had to just straight up turn something down just because either it didn't fit my disability or I just didn't feel comfortable with the work. But yeah, it is tough, because it does feel like it is a conversation that some able-bodied people have, but not, everyone does. So it's kind of hard to talk to or have someone to find, to talk to. Luckily, we have such a, I guess, pretty tight-knit community. I mean, most of us know each other. So, we find each other, we do, and we have these conversations. And the thing is that we're, the craziest thing about the disability community, I always tell people, is we are a special community in the sense that we don't generally come from the same places or the same background or the same religion, so many different things that other communities identify with. And because when you walk into a room of people with disabilities who have decided to come together to have conversations, oftentimes we're vastly different, even so much so to our disabilities. And the thing that kind of brings us together as a community really is how we feel in the world and how able-bodied people treat us. That's what brings us together as a community. That's our signifying thing. And so when I'm going back to that marketing thing, when I'm trying to figure out how to market myself, it's just tough. You see, and you go on Instagram and you're like, man, people who show their disabilities more often tend to get more followers. And so I have to think to myself, do I need to show more of my disability in order for that? Which in a way was beautiful, because I kind of discovered I like to show off my legs a little bit more now. But at the same time, feeling like I have to change a part of what I'm doing, and on top of that, as far as disability advocacy, I never thought I'd be a disability advocate. I never grew up trying to be an advocate for disability or wanting to treat. I have so much respect for people who do it, but you kind of get it put on you. It's almost like you sort of have to put this backpack on. And you have no choice, because you have an opinion and you want to speak up and you want to speak out and you want to help other people with disabilities. But it's at the same time, it's you just want to be the actor that you always imagined yourself being. You want it to be the artist that you always imagined yourself being, without the addition of this thing that actually is pretty minimal in my life. I tell people, man, I'm like, hey, you want to feel bad for me? Feel bad that I grew up a gay man. Hug your local gay. As having a disability, for me in particular, wasn't a huge thing in my life. It wasn't until everybody was telling me that I was different. So everyone was like, oh, you're special. You're that special kid. And oh, you don't just sing, you sing with no legs. You're special. You don't just act, you act with no legs. You're special. And I'm just like, oh, so it's tough. Yeah, it's tough trying to figure out that balance of just being an artist with a disability, and just being a person with a disability. You kind of swing through all of those at some point.
Mm-hmm. I think, Eric, what Eric talked about, and I think you articulated it so well, was when there's a community of disabled individuals or artists, the thing we have in common is society's sort of perception of us. And that's sort of kind of what brings us together, whether it be amputees or wheelchair users, individuals who are blind, low vision, little people, et cetera, et cetera. Just so that broad spectrum of disability, there's so much diversity within the disability community, and we're in every community that is in the world. So, and that's sort of what we're talking about, I think, with ableism. And when we're using that word and we're speaking specifically to theater, I think it's like, that's what it is. It's this institution, these ideas that have been generational on what is beautiful, what is excellence, what is, as I think Jesse was saying, sort of the perception of what is good. There's this perception that if you see a disabled actor, then yeah, maybe they're just not going to be as nuanced or as effective as an actor without a disability. So I think those things exist. Circling back to marketing, when I finished my undergraduate, I got a prosthetic hand that looked realistic because I thought if I wanted to be an actor, which is what I wanted to do, my goal was just to be a professional actor, I had to have two hands or look like I had two hands. And I went to audition for this thing called SETC. It's like the Southeastern Theater Conference, this big, audition thing. And I was prepping my audition as I graduated, and my acting coach said, David, you're not really acting, you're just acting like you have two hands. And it really hit me that, like, right, I wasn't focused on any intention. And, it's a 60-second monologue. There's so many things that are going on, but there was no ability to try to connect as an actor. I was just trying to make my movement seem as though it was a realistic hand. And it sort of popped into my head, I have to be me. I can't cover this up. And if I want to really be the artist I want to be, I need to be it in the body that I have. And once I saw an agent for the first time, and I tell this story a lot, the agent asked me why I was there, and I said because I'm an actor and I would like to do more work and have representation. And the agent said, well, that thing you have there is only going to allow you to be cast in roles specifically written for someone with one hand, and there's just not a lot of roles for people with one hand. So you probably should find something else. And I was so hurt and so kind of like taken aback. And this was really, really early when I was still really young. And I kept moving forward, but I've spent like 20 years almost, or 15 years, trying to prove this person wrong. And it's frustrating that I really haven't. I mean, I've gotten to do things where my hand doesn't mean anything. That's true. There's certain projects that I do. But if I'm called in for something on a bigger or larger scale, whether that be film, television, or even a larger scale theater production, it's predominantly because of my disability. It's because I'm going to be a wounded warrior, or it's because I'm going to be a victim in some way. And that's the perception, I think, as a profession that is still in the minds of some casting professionals, some producers, some directors, is that seeing this disabled body, we only feel we should see this if it's part of the plot, if it's part of the story. So for me, now in my marketing of myself, I don't hide the fact that I have on my resume PWD in big bold letters, right hand amputee. I use the word amputee because if I use limb difference, people wouldn't know what I was talking about. And that's still because we don't have an idea about the breadth, I think, of disability sometimes. So I don't want to hide it. I don't want to really work on things that that would require me to hide it. I don't necessarily think of it as a disadvantage. Like Jesse and like Eric, as I've gotten older, I am more particular about what I will say yes to. It's hard to say no, especially if you have an agent or a representation that is putting you out for things. It's really hard to come back and say thanks, but no thanks on this. And luckily, I have relationships where I can have those conversations and say this is why this is uncomfortable for me. This is why I don't want to say these words. This is what this means to someone with a disability or my lived experience of disability. So for me, it's putting it out there, and I am striving to prove that stupid agent wrong, and be able just to be a character that is a father, that is the school principal, that is someone who is living life and experiencing life, whether it be on stage or on camera, where that disability can just live in the and breathe in the experience of what that character lives in their humanity. So for me, it's just keeping that upfront and honest when you go into a room. Sorry, I felt like I got on a soapbox.
Can I just add this? This is it really came to my mind when they were talking. It's like, as people who don't have disabilities, when we applaud people who have disabilities, you know, after they perform, really my question is, why are you applauding them? Like, have your little underlying, like, oh, that's so wonderful that they're doing this. They're so brave, you know, like, or are you applying, like, they were good. That's some talent, you know, like, so that's just something that now, and you know me, Amanda, like, I check people all the time. Like, I'm just like, well, why'd you like it? What is your real take on it? You know, so, and maybe, and again, I'm not here to like force my in-your-face lifestyle on you guys, because that's what I do. But I think maybe you should ask people, like, well, why do you think I'm a good actor? You know, or do you think I'm a good actor because I'm actually a good actor? Or do you think I'm a good actor because you think, oh, well, with this, I mean, she is so good. You know, they're so good, you know, because of that. You know, so yeah.
But Rebecca,
that people add that mess.
Just to add to that point, and I think it's a great point that you're making, for an actor with a disability, I think it's really hard to find that courage, to find that sense of really taking that step, because opportunities are so few and far between, and so because we're still sort of seen only now has it become a pretty standard practice for authentic casting to happen. I mean, Eric and Jesse, I'm sure, like, just in the few years that you guys have, because you guys are still so very young, but just in the few years that you guys have been performing, I think you've seen that change. I mean, I think you've seen a sense of there are casting directors that are really looking to find an actor who's a wheelchair user if the character's written that way, or an amputee.
Right, or even writers. Now they're looking for writers. Like, they're like, because they know they can't write about that.
Right.
But they still do.
So,
right. They still do.
Oh yeah. So.
But no, there's progress being made. But what I think it's hard is it is hard for an actor with a disability to have to risk that sense of potential backlash, to kind of be upfront with someone and be like, oh, did you just kind of cast me because you really thought I was a good actor, or did you cast me because this was a...
Well, I get it, David, and that's why I said my in your face, because this is why I was whitelisted for many years, because y'all, if you know how much of a fool I acted at Second City, but like I have always been that. I'm like, you know what? I will cut my nose off to spite my face, but I'll walk away leaving a burn mark, and I want to leave that burn mark because but that's just me. That's just me, and I'm just saying, like, please don't take on my, that's why I'm still at 43, rebuilding my career, and all my old friends are like, okay, yeah, Rebecca, we'll, yeah, we want you to come back in. But you gonna go off again about whiteness? And I'm like, yeah, I am. So,
Hasn't changed.
but yeah, that's just me. That's just me. You
Rebecca,
guys. So
I'll be honest with you.
That's very interesting. I had that epiphany.
I'm very similar.
What were you saying, Eric?
Yeah, like I don't know how much of a delay I'm on. Sorry, but I'm very similar in your way, and I'll say, like, just coming from having a disability and being that way, it's hard. I'm constantly always. I don't believe anyone. I don't believe anything anybody says to me after anything, and just before I make that point, I will say I think that is the single most damaging thing to artists with disabilities. I think it is the number one thing that limits our entire community, is that you spend your entire life being told you are a special little egg. And it makes it so hard for you to grow and develop as a person with a disability, because you are being told that everything you do is special. And so you don't really know, like, okay, is the way I did this or that. But I will say the thing that I do love about the theater that's a little different from TV film is that there's that moment when you're on stage that able-bodied people cannot fake. It's when you're sitting there in front of the audience and there's that connection between you and the audience that you feel, and you know when you're doing something right and you know when you're doing something wrong. And and I don't know if it's something every actor has, but it's definitely something that I have felt and have. Thank God I started in the theater, and I would encourage a lot of people with disabilities who want to go into acting to start in the theater, because that's where you're going to get it raw. That's where you're going to get it live, and nobody can tell you because when you get off stage, that's when the opinions completely, because the thing is, even if you did a really great job, if you have a disability, you did this job over here. So no matter what job you do, you always have to account for an extra 3 steps of encouragement, and which is nice for the ego for that much time, until you get older, until you become more realistic. When you start going out into the world, when suddenly your talent is dependent on whether or not you eat, whether or not you have healthcare coverage, whether or not you are capable of doing the things that you need to do. Once you get out into the world, you start to realize, those compliments mean nothing, and they did nothing for me. So it's a balance, I think, and also too, sometimes you can be that person that, like, I've gone and I've asked people for those tough questions, but it can be just kind of hardening on the heart. And then sometimes it's tough for them too, because you're kind of putting a weight on them and a responsibility of them to critique you and to tell you all the negative things about you that nobody wants to do, so it's a burden. So I think one of the biggest things you have to develop as an artist with a disability is that self-awareness and that self-ability to critique, that self-ability to be critical. Some people, a lot of times, are like, Eric, you are so hard on yourself. You are so hard. Like, you need to. And I'm like, no, I'm not hard enough.
Nobody gives us the rigor that we're asking for.
Yes.
They go easy on you because you have a disability.
Or I think they go easy on a lot of people. I will say it's maybe not just disability. I don't want to put it all on disability. It's also just, there's lots of people that I've come out of a show and I hated the show, but of course, I'm gonna go to the and say, that was great, of course, But there is an undeniable extra that you do get as a disability. Like it's something more, because and sometimes the thing that's tough too is that sometimes it really is genuine. You know, I think that sometimes people are genuinely shocked to see a person with a disability do something that you just did on stage or that you just did on camera, and they're trying to be genuine, and you are trying to find their intent behind that, you know, and it's like this brain thing that's just, it's maddening if you get too into it, which is why I always say, like, I have to be much more self-reflective and I have to be much more critical, because if I spend all that time trying to dig into other people's brains, it'll drive me insane.
That kind of leads me into, wait, Jesse, were you going to say something?
No, I actually think I know where your next question is going to go, and so I'll wait and answer it in a second.
Okay, cool. That kind of leads me to, I'm a firm believer of education. Education will save so many people, whether it's done in an actual institution or out in the streets. But do you all think that there needs to be, and I specifically wrote it a certain way, disability courses that are mandatory for every college student or everybody who enters some form of a educational institution to take, in order to break this bubble of, oh wow, they're spectacular. All they did was walk down the street. Many people walk down the street. What do you all think?
I've spent the last probably 8 years of my life. I did undergrad BFA drama at NYU, and then 2 years out, and then back now for another, what will be 4 years after the pandemic. And I've watched the progression of all of these things to their various usefulness. You know, NYU was exclusively watered down feedback of like congratulatory back patting and praise for something that I wasn't doing. And that's the biggest reason why I went to grad school. I think that, like, you know, education is super, super important. But then what I found when I went to grad school is that I really needed to teach these people, predominantly the instructors, how to hold me accountable, exactly what Rebecca and Eric and David to an extent were talking about, because I had to go to people who its jobs were to make sure that I was learning. Otherwise it wasn't happening. But what I found is, because Yale trial and errored various disability education curriculums. They have a really, really big equity, diversity, and inclusion program. They predominantly use arts equity, which is a predominantly white supremacist dismantling inclusion consulting firm. I don't know if that's the right term to use for them. They're great folks. But there was this really, really good grasp that the students had around other intersections within, you know, the student body, the human body. And when it got to disability, people balked. Like, I'll be really honest. People didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to talk about me. They didn't know how to talk about disabled experiences that they were having themselves. You know, there was a lot of raising me up as the first and only disabled student to come through the school, which is patently impossible. That school graduates, I think it's between all of the disciplines, 70 to 75 students a year since the 1950s. I just was the first one that they couldn't ignore anymore, because I can't pass. And so they really kind of showed their underbelly. And what I found is the students were able to pretty quickly take the language of, you know, critical race theory or queer theory and change it and apply it to disability, because what we're talking about is just basically embodiment. But it was a slightly harder transition for my faculty, and all of them have been amazing and have like asked questions and taken so much more time than they really needed to, or that the university is paying them to do. So I want to like be very, very clear about that. I don't want it to sound like I'm dragging anyone or anything, because I think that the learning process has been really, really amazing. But when you're in training programs, and usually that's where young actors are understanding what they know about the theater and what this thing that we're doing is from people who are deemed experts in their field. And the problem with experts in their field is that there's a mythology around what they do. They have been given, often especially at the university level, they've been given the keys to the castle of insert discipline here, and said, students will look to you to answer their questions, and therefore you are the arbiter of what works and what doesn't. And if there's a whole subset of the population that they've really never had to think about before, it's not going into the work, and it's not going into what the mythologies of this craft are, the arbitration of what this craft is from generations to generations to generations. So yeah, while I think it's really necessary to have disability inclusion baked into EDI in general, because theater, and theater particularly, and not necessarily film or other media, is so physically embodied in almost every discipline, you need to talk about dramaturgically, narratively, what we are asking from bodies, both visual bodies, what stories we're telling, dramaturgically, and then also what the ways that we know to make theater, a 4-week production calendar, what does that mean for bodies? What does that mean for access needs? And the two can't exist without one another. It's not enough to put a disabled person on stage and say that we've done it. That's not education, because you're not thinking about the ways we tell stories. We're not thinking about the narratives that we just have, the Lauras from Glass Menagerie that just is like in our collective conscious, which is disability as fragility, or fragility as a metaphor for disability, or vice versa. We're not questioning those things. Those things just exist, and so they get reinscribed. But then we're also not questioning what bodies need, and the ways that the systems that we're used to making don't hold up for bodies that have timeline needs, bathroom break needs, physical needs, like non-linear like sleep patterns, non-linear abilities. And that needs to be taught to the top so that it can trickle. And that's like value, like trickle down economics. That's not what I'm going. But like these people that are like bestowing on high what it is that we're doing for a living, they need to reshape and rethink what it is that we're doing. So these like generational ways of teaching theater, the person who has been there for 60 years, who has so much expertise, might only have expertise in one area, and we need to question if there's more expertise that's not being heard. So yes, to answer your question, sorry, that was very long-winded. Yeah, it's super necessary, but not in the ways that one would think by a disability studies class where students come and take it. I think that's also necessary, but that should be a pillar of any, like David was saying, any other DEI, EDI plus accessibility conversation.
Yeah, I find, yo, Jesse, man, ooh, you had me over here so hyped. Just off of that, like right at the end of what you were saying, yeah, I think at certain times, there's like this, you kind of get weighted with this responsibility of becoming all of those things that Jesse was just saying. Like for instance, I have played, I play with King. I play, he is a person who uses a chair as a mobility device, and I use prosthetics as a mobility device. And because, no one around has any sort of expertise on that, none of the directors know anything about how my body moves or how a character would move around in a scene using a chair, how a character would use their hands or do these things. I have to become that expert on the fly, especially as somebody who especially hasn't even used this mobility device. So I found myself on screen sitting here going like, okay, how would I use my hands? Like where what would look natural where I'm not doing the same thing over again? Does it feel natural to move here like this and do that in this way? And it's tough, because you have to become this sort of expert in it. And it would be nice to live in a world where, man, I don't even know what I would do if a director came up to me in any capacity and was like, hey, I've studied a lot on, able-bodied or actors with disabilities. And I had a question about this. And I was wondering, can we do this a little bit? I think I would cry just like right there in front of them. I'd be like, you're a godsend. Like I've never could have even imagined. And I think, no, I definitely did cry. You know what? I did cry when I joined Full Radius Dance. I definitely, it was so crazy to be sitting around a group of people who talked about my body in a way that just felt natural and just felt like just made sense. And I was learning things about my body that I had never even considered before, because I was working with experts, And so, yeah, it would be beautiful to be able to have that anywhere I go as a performer, just like able-bodied people have.
So if I'm hearing you, or if the wheels are processing correctly, it's almost like if you're asking actors to do a fight scene, you hire a fight director or a fight choreographer. If I'm asking you to be in a wheelchair, I'm not sure exactly what the term is, but let me hire somebody who is versatile or has knowledge in how to use a wheelchair, and not just expect you as the actors, performers, or directors to automatically know all of this information.
Or at least be having or starting the conversation. And I think some people are afraid of that too. It's like, if you don't know, then come to me to have the conversation. Talk to me about the conversation. Sometimes as an actor, I would just let things happen. As somebody with a disability, I have problems and I'll have things that I want done, and I think that this needs to be done better, and I have a problem with it, but no one came up to me. No one had even a moment came up to me to talk to me. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna do what every other able-bodied actor is doing here, and that's my job. And I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability. So yeah, it would be nice.
And I think, but it's not just I think it's opening the conversation to, I mean, ideally, hopefully you've hired an actor with a disability to play that role, and it's not an actor without a disability that you're like, okay, here's how, let's pretend, how we're going to, perform in a wheelchair. But I think what Eric is saying, and I totally agree with this, is that and I think what Jesse was saying, it's learning how these bodies that have not been part of our society, really, for very long. It's not many generations back that we were not hidden away or just not put in front of others because we were grotesque, because this was something that was not appeasable to look to or to look at, and I think that's still where the sense of ableism is still there, because that's still kind of ringing around in people's head of like, why do we need an accessible stage? Because a person with a disability they're not going to be performing. You know, we want them to be audience patrons maybe, but we're not going to, you know, that's still, I think, a paradigm. And I think that's what we're trying to dismantle. And I think the more you talk about authentic experience with someone with a disability, and you allow that person who might be a performer with a disability, as Eric was, that's using a different mode of accommodation, their bodies are moving in a little bit of a different way, being willing to have that conversation of like, let's figure this out, let's find a way that this feels natural to the motivations of the character, not to the aesthetics of pretending that this is that we want to replicate disability, but the aesthetics of this disabled individual who is portraying this character, who is living live and immediately on stage and providing an immediacy of their action and their intent in what they're doing.
Well, and what is happening and what we're saying is actually, you know, Amanda, your question was about basically, do we need to teach able-bodied students and or disabled students who maybe haven't identified or who don't know their history, the disabled history? But actually, it occurred to me that we never get to have an expert be an expert for us. We're always the expert in the room. I'm always the only person in a room who knows about disability. And so I'm not pushing my body to new heights, you know, like I'm translating instead of transposing because I don't have anybody to look to, and I'm just trying to keep up as opposed to learning from other people like us. And I only can do that in a social setting. And I've never once in my educational history been able to learn from a disabled instructor about my body that made it my experience richer, particularly my experience. It's always been me educating them. Not to say that I haven't learned a ton from people in their discipline, but it's never been a say, I see you, and here's also what I can do, and here's my expertise around our situation and how I can help you. It's never that.
But we have women's studies, Black studies, and gay studies, and all of these different groups. And there's 10% of us in America. Why isn't that there?
And we have disability studies scholars. It exists. They're just not making their way into practicing, to being practitioners. And if they are, they're not being given positional power to be experts in disability and in the thing that they're practicing.
And you know, I'm sure it gets exhausting to be a self-advocate 24/7. I get that.
Yeah. Rebecca, we haven't really in the necessary. Okay, crap. I have 2 more questions, but Corey said 1 more. Dang it. Just so we get all full, like a more fuller perspective as well. How is it as a caregiver, as in like the jobs that you say yes to? Is it? I asked that question in a sense earlier, or alluded to it of how you market yourself. Are there certain jobs you're like, I can't do this because look, I'm 24/7, or how is it?
Yeah. So like I said, my mother is a stroke survivor, and I don't know if anyone has ever cared for stroke survivors. You know, the left brain, right brain. And actually what's really interesting is when you end up being a caregiver for a stroke survivor, you end up like learning a lot about the brain. Like, you know, sometimes I get exhausted. I'm like, you know, I could be a neurologist. But so having a stroke on the right side of the brain, there's very different long-term effects than having a left stroke brain. What happens, and my mother had a right stroke brain, a hemorrhage. And what typically happens over time with those survivors is they become extremely depressed. And they become extremely paranoid. They become extremely it's a very difficult journey. Left brain stroke patients over time. Now, this is not everybody. I'm not speaking for everybody, but they're more positive. I have a more positive approach to, healing and rehab and therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, all that stuff. For right brain strokes, you have they might be quicker to quit, and my mom was one of them. So my mom is partially paralyzed on her left side. And because of that, like my mom needs to be bathed and my mom needs to, she can't cook for herself. There was a point where she could drive, but now because one of the aftermaths of the stroke is dementia now, and also my mom formed seizures. So now my mom gets seizures. As long as she takes her meds, seizure meds, I think we're good. She had a major one last week, but anyway. So like in watching, I have to monitor her meds. I have to get her meds. I have to make sure she's bathed. I have to make sure she's fed. Because that's another thing. My mom could go all day and not eat. And I'll say, Mom, did you eat? So I have to make sure she's eating. And so if I take on a job that tells me, oh, Rebecca, you have to be in LA for 3 months. So now I have to decide, are you going to be able to pay me enough that I can pay for a CNA to come around the clock, 7 days a week, 24/7 to watch my mom, who will tolerate my mom's depression, bitiness, and also be able to just know how to handle her finances. I mean, just even like I had to, just the other day, I had to say, Mom, okay, so I need some paperwork because we're going to file your taxes. And so I have to do her finances. So like when I take on gigs and I take on jobs, like reading people's scripts and, and writing for shows, like I have to take into account, like, okay, you guys understand, I can't work until 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't work till 1 o'clock in the morning. And then on top of it, you guys, I have 2 boys. I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. My mom had her stroke when I was pregnant with my second son. So, and I'm recently separated. So I was married, and my husband, I guess you call him a strange husband now. He was amazing to help, and he helped with that process. But now that I'm not, I have to make sure, I have to say, okay, now are you guys going to know, like, I can't work till 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't work till 1. Like, I have to cut you off. But that means I have to work harder when I do work, right? So, and I have a mother who will call me 10 times in a row, right? Because she's hearing knocking at the door in the middle of the night. Or she's hearing knocking. I'm like, Mom, there's no one there. So I have to make sure that somebody's there to care for her, but at the same time, I have to set boundaries for myself. So, which when you're stressed out like that, and when you are a caregiver, it limits your creativity. It does. So people always want you to be on, right? They're like, okay, so Rebecca, we need you to write these, 3 episodes by next week. And it's like, okay. So that means I have to, when I start my creativity, I got to be on, even though my mom just threw up on herself, right? So after cleaning up my mom, I got to get back into creative mode and be funny, right? I got to knock it out. So it's like so that's why I have to give people the reality. It's like, I can't get it done in 2 weeks. It's probably going to be a month, and I lose jobs. People don't hire me because of that when they hear. So there are times I do have to say, I'm not telling people my business. I'm not going to tell them I'm a mom. I'm not going to tell them I'm a caregiver. And until after they hire me and they're like, oh, you care. Yeah, I'm a caregiver. Okay. So anyway, because people will do the, oh my God. And I'm like, don't do that. Just give me the assignment. I'll tell you what I can and can't do. And then let's knock this out.
Mm-hmm. I think somewhat similar to what we've heard all night is don't make assumptions about what I can and cannot do. Like, tell me what you're looking for. I'll let you know if I can get this done.
And it's sad that you can't be authentic up front, because if you are, it could knock you out of the list. So, but anyway. And let's not add on top of it, I'm a Black woman. So already, you know, I walk in the door and it's already like, you know, so then when I add all these other things, like, oh, you got too much going on, honey. Well, I'll go get somebody else to do it. And it's like, but I got to pay bills, honey. I got to pay bills. And this is my profession. So, and then you also have those people who, because I do have this life of caregiving, you know, they think that I will be grateful for just exposure. And it's like, no. I've had 20 years in this game. I've been exposed. I have exposure. Now I need you to pay me, you know, or I become an expert on how to navigate things, right? And then they want to pick my brain. Like, so how do you, you know? And I'm like, don't pick my brain. I'll say, what's your budget? And then you can pick my brain. So, which also has led me to be cut off because people think, they're like, oh, Rebecca, you know, she's not open. I'm very open once you cut me a check.
Yeah. We shouldn't work for free.
Right. I mean, let's just be honest.
No explanation.
Yeah. And I always compare it to a white, able, heterosexual male. Would you do that to him? No, you wouldn't.
No.
If he said, oh, you know, yeah, I can have this conversation and share with you and be a consultant, but this is my fee, you would find it within your budget to pay him. So why all of a sudden I have to be a consultant, but I'm doing it from my heart, you know?
I will say that on many occasions as well. I have had whole conversations with actors sitting there trying to tell me, Eric, you should speak with them. And I'm like, no, I was not given a writer's conversation for this. What I would do is I will say the words and I will address it after the fact. And they can do that. You know, but yeah, pay me. I completely agree.
And also what I would like to say is that part of being a caregiver does affect your health. You know, you do know caregivers do it automatically. I think they said like for every year that you're a caregiver, it takes off 6 months off your life. You know, that's why sometimes caregivers die before the people that they're caring for. So you do, yeah, it's a common thing. So that's why you have to. So and this is why, you know, people have told me all the time, they're like, well, Rebecca, you know, why don't you just get like a state job? Just get a job with the state where you get benefits and all this stuff and you don't have to hustle hard. And then it's 9 to 5, you can be there for your kids. I'm sure there's benefits for caregivers. And I'm like, but then I'd be miserable. So this working in theater, film, and television, it's a spiritual experience for me. It's my church. It's my mosque. So if I don't do this work, I am miserable. So I had to advocate for myself because I did. I used to work in public health. So I had to advocate for myself and say, no, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make this work. And I have so far.
The career doesn't need to be that way. Also, it could be a 9 to 5 if we weren't so used to the model of working for free, of scrounging. There's no reason that the development of art has to happen between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. Unless that's your artistic process and that's what you need. But there's no like, unless it's a night shoot, it's a thing that we made ourselves. And so we can easily change it.
Yeah, and exactly. Okay, and here's another example. So I got my MFA in screenwriting from the University of Georgia, and by the way, excellent program. They're like my family. And they were like, immediately upon graduating, they were like, okay, Rebecca, so you need to move to LA or you need to come here because I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. And they said, okay, so you need to move to Atlanta, right? Okay, so because the writers' rooms are in LA and the work is in Atlanta. So come on. And I'm like, I can't. I can't. I have my mom. I have my boys. I can't. And it was just kind of like, what? I said, well, why can't I be a virtual writer? Like, I can write a whole series from home. I can just email you the scripts. We could go over them through Google Docs. Like, why do I have to uproot because that's another thing. Like, because they were like, well, why don't you just move your mom and your kid? I'm like, but we found an amazing neurologist at Duke University. We found amazing, my mother has a series of blood clots. That's part of the problem. So we found an amazing phlebotomist and her PCP. Like, they know my mom's DNA in and out. And like my mom, so if I uproot and root my family to LA, on top of finding schools, I have to find an amazing neurologist. I have to find an amazing phlebotomist. I have to find an amazing PCP, physical therapy, occupational therapist. And I have to do all that before I move my mom. And I have to make sure my mom is safe and feels happy with doing that. Even though I have to make these decisions for my mom, I also have to check in with her and say, okay, mom, like, you've got to like them. So like, I'm not the final decision maker. So, and my mom's like, no, I like everybody. So that's another thing. And I just find it's like, why can't we change the industry to be more broader thinking and, say like, okay, maybe a writer's room can be on Zoom, and it can be. We can have writer's rooms on Zoom, but because we have these, again, and I'm I'm gonna say it, because we have these straight, powerful black men. Straight, powerful white men. I'm sorry, black men would be totally different.
I was like,
straight, powerful white men who run the television and film industry. And they sit in these rooms and they don't want to do anything outside of their 1950s thinking box. They're like, no, the writer's room is going to be right here in the studio. And so now, because of my situation, I'm limited with the type of television I can write. And that's why I decided just to write my own.
Mm-hmm. That leads me somewhat to the last question. And feel free, if you all have to hop off, please, I'm not trying to keep you hostage. Okay? Even though I would love to continue conversations for hours on end, I know people have other lives that don't consist of these, 5 windows that we see right now. Did you all feel forced into acting? Because that's, in a sense, maybe the only place you saw anybody at all of the disability community. Like, did you feel as if you had to just do acting, or like, do you want to be artistic directors, or I don't know, lighting designers? Do you all want to be in the catwalks? Like,
personally, it was the direct opposite for me, actually. When I was younger, before going into college, I was spending just as much time as in the theater as I was spending in the choral room. And when it came down to what I was going to get a degree in, I was falling in love with theater. I was falling madly in love with being on stage. But I was telling myself that I could not be an actor because I would not get work, and I would end up struggling and starving and being dependent on my parents, because I need things like healthcare. I can't be struggling. That's the thing, is sometimes when you have a disability, you can't be a starving actor, a starving artist. Yeah. It's not an option. Like it's like sink or swim or go swim in another pool. So I personally was thinking that because I was not seeing actors like me reflected anywhere, and there apparently were actors with disabilities. I just didn't know they had disabilities. But if you don't know, you don't know. So for me, I've spent a good bit of my life preparing to be an artistic director, preparing to be someplace where I could express myself and my views off of the stage, or I was going to go into something like choral music, something where people didn't look at, and I also felt like in opera, they were less concerned about the body. And so that's why I was kind of leaning towards that way. But thank God, when I got to when I got to college and I kept auditioning for shows because I couldn't stay off the stage, they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I don't think I'll get work." And they were like, "Shut up, you're going to be a theater major." And so I did it, and thank God I did. But yeah, no, I actually had the direct opposite thing for me in particular.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience. Pre NYU, you know, when you're 17 and figuring out where you're going to go to school, to Eric, except that it was me saying, "Oh, I'm going to go into this, I'm going to do this," and adults in my life saying, "Great, totally, you should, but nobody's ever going to cast you. So what about directing?" And so when you're 18, the adults in your life know best, right? You know, your theater teachers as a kid are like, they're God. You know, the things that they say to me still live rent free in my brain. And I have been out so long. It's been a decade or more, and I still hear them. So that has so much power. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a director. And I did my first 2.5 years at NYU as a director. Started making a lot of devised work. Started making work about disability and realized I had no one to cast but myself, so I had to switch. But at the same time, you know, I love directing. I still look at plays through a world lens as opposed to a character lens, and it's been really empowering for me as an actor. But a big reason why I stopped directing is because of the pipeline to paid director positions. It starts by interning. And what is interning but hanging lights? Going up to there's the top of a theater in a church and hanging lights and working with people who you're doing manual labor for, and stage manage directing or stage manage ADing, which like shouldn't happen, but they make young directors do. And that's setting up and taking down rehearsal rooms. That's setting up tables. That's putting out chairs. That's taking notes as fast as possible. That's working for $0, exclusively doing manual labor, and being asked to be as inconspicuous in a room as possible. And when you're in a chair, when you need somebody, when you gotta call somebody to be like, "Hey, can you help me get into this building?" Before your unpaid internship starts, often, you know, you would be the first person at the theater. It didn't really make a lot of sense, and nobody was hiring me. The people who were doing the observerships, the internships, the assistantships, you know, were making those relationships in class and saying, "Look how I can physically support your project." And I couldn't do that. And nobody was coming to me and asking me to physically support their project because they knew that it wasn't going to happen. So therefore, I wasn't then getting the next assistant directorship. And when you're assistant director, often when that director has a job that they can't take, they'll recommend you. And that's how it happens. And that pipeline just wasn't possible for me. And I found that people were much more curious about disability on stage than anywhere else in their process, because on stage they can check a box. And I know that sounds so cynical, because I'm so glad that audiences are seeing themselves. I think it's necessary to have the visible representation of communities within your productions. But people get more funding if they can see the good work that you're doing, as opposed to trust that you're making an accessible space for everybody. Nobody cares that your rehearsal process is 6 weeks as opposed to 4 weeks. They care that they see something they've never seen before, and that as many people as possible can see and interact with that thing. And that thing is often people with bodies, and it's a lot of burden, but it's also way more accessible than any other thing that I could possibly do. Like if I'm on set, there's a driver who drives me to set. Like sets have money. Sets have money particularly for actors. There is, historically actors are just babysat in general. So if I need support, that's baked in. They're used to that. As opposed to if I'm a PA and I need support, that's not going to happen. I'm just not going to.
I was gonna say, sometimes I just want to go up to PAs and just hug them.
I know. When I was on Speechless, there was a PA who I think she eventually made it to the writer's room. She's a brilliant comedy writer out of Northwestern. Her name is Jackie Quinn, and I just want to raise her up. She's so smart. But she was the first PA that I had ever seen, and it was only because that show dealt with disability and was inherently accessible from the jump. But otherwise, how, for her, luckily, right time, right place, and also being brilliant coming out of the TV program at Northwestern, how else do you break through that barrier when you are not tokenizing yourself to get work? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it's changing. I really think it is. I think I've watched a lot of disability writers group for or funding for writers with disabilities or new writers with disabilities or disabled filmmakers. I'm seeing more of it. But yeah, your question, all to circle back to, Amanda, your question was both spot on and also I counted myself out of the career for a while. So.
David or Rebecca, did you all want to weigh in?
I think that was such an interesting take, Jesse, and I don't even know if I thought of it that way. I think I thought most of the experiences that I've heard about, most performers with disabilities were always encouraged to do something else.
Yeah.
Encouraged, like as you were saying, your experience, encouraged to be a director. Eric kind of maybe think more about. But I guess our experiences were similar. You were like, I don't really know if I can get work. As an actor with a disability, I thought, I have to put something on this disability to hide it, to almost like a costume to fit into an able-bodied world. But I do think there are things that are moving in that direction. My personal experience, I didn't want to really do anything but be a performer, be an actor. So I didn't listen to anyone who said anything. What I was told a lot is you should do voiceover work, by the way, because voiceover work doesn't have anything to do with your disability. So I don't know why a 1940s radio guy was the one who gave me advice, but somehow he was. But anyway, but I think Jesse's point is well taken. There's a group that's kind of forming with a variety of artists that are really trying to create some sort of resource, some sort of place for consultation and for encouragement for the theater community in terms of a broad breadth of disability, whether it be disability performers, disability writers, disability production personnel. I don't know. And that we're sort of building this list. It's like, gosh, I know of one lighting designer with a disability. There's a lot of stage managers that are kind of people that at least this community, we're beginning to find people, and then hopefully we can continue to grow. So I think, to Jesse's point, not only are young aspiring theater professionals potentially getting to see themselves represented in a variety of different spaces in the theater, but that that pipeline is beginning to also change. And I think, again, that's coming from Jesse's point earlier, that it's got to come down from the top. It's got to come down from the ones who are saying this is how we make theater, and those are decisions by the top and by the leadership. And I think, to Rebecca's point too, we can begin to change those paradigms. And hopefully this is part of this raising the curtain, this whole idea that we don't have to have 3 10 out of 12s, that we can kind of begin to sort of figure out, we can work a little bit differently, and we can really try to form new models and be able to create the same amount of artistic quality.
I completely agree. 3 10 out of 12s. I'm not staying up that late. I hate staying up that late. I can't remember who made the point. 9 to 5 is when I work well. Honestly, if we're going to be really honest, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. is when you're getting prime Amanda. Like me here at 6 p.m., I'm like, focus. Where are we? Okay, great. Yes. Rebecca, did you want to add anything before I say anything?
So your question was, were you kind of forced into this theater, television film world, or did you choose it? I think it's my answer. I'm gonna be one of those like artsy fartsy people and be like, it was both. I can't stand those people. Like, it's both. So no, it was really both, because and you're like, just answer the question. Stop being so esoteric and metaphysical, But anyway, but no, it really was both, because my first thought, like when I go back to like when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old, like all I ever thought about was performing. That's all I ever thought. I was like on somebody's stage doing something. Either I was singing, dancing, acting, something, right? Giving speeches. I was gonna be a little Martin Luther King, right? But like, and it's really interesting. It's like throughout my life, I knew that that's what I was supposed to be. But then every once in a while, I'm like, well, maybe I should be a chemical engineer, And so I would like try to say, and like life would be like, you need to go back. So, or like I say, okay, well, maybe I need to work in public health. And then I would do that. And then, or like maybe I should be a paralegal. And so, but every time the universe would literally force me back on stage, or force me back in front of a camera or behind the camera, writing or something, or teaching. So I never could run away from it. And finally, at the ripe age of 38, I was like, okay, I'm done fighting this. I get it. I will just have a sporadic paycheck. It's okay. I will make it work, and I've now acquiesced to it, and now I am professionally the happiest I've ever been in my life. So yeah, I think with this arts journey, and anybody can tell you in the field that the more you work in the arts, the more you learn to self-advocate, and then from that, the more successful you become. Is when you set these boundaries, is that people start respecting you, and you're like, okay, it might take them a while to respect you, but when you are firm with your boundaries, they might ignore you for like 5 years or 3 years. They'll come back. They're like an ex-boyfriend. They will come back and they will call you again, and it's like, oh, so what you doing? You're like, okay, I see you like this. You couldn't stay away, and so they come back, and when they come back, they respect you, and then you can grow. So yeah.
Thank you. I want to say thank you all for being a part of this. Like I said in the first Raising the Curtain, which was last week, that this is like a living journal for Actors Express about, it's really out there in the world for us to do better. And so I'm so happy we can make these strides all together, but also for you all lending your voice to this conversation. And like I said, I think I said this before we were live, that thank you for your personal opinions and not feeling that you had to carry the entire disabled community on your back. I did not expect that from you all. So once again, thank you for just your voice and your personal views and thoughts on this. Corey, who you all can't see, is back. Oh wait, Eric, did you? I saw the church finger.
could I throw in two quick things? I know we got to go. Just two quick things. To eat me if I didn't say them. All right, but moving forward, just for the future, people watching this who are looking to know more, don't call me in for your crutchy if you can't call me in for your seaweed. Don't call me in to play your porgy if you can't call me in to play some able-bodied role. I'm gonna say no. I will flat out tell you no. So then that goes for people with disabilities. I'm pretty sure a good bit of us feel that way. Like I could feel like I could speak for the community on that. And the second thing is, don't expect that everybody with a disability is woke and understanding of all this. I had to learn this stuff by entering in the community. When I first got in, I had my own stigmas. I had my own prejudices. When I went to the Disability Film Festival, I cried sitting in the audience because I realized just how prejudiced I was as an actor with a disability. So I think one of the things that is important is outreach and going out there and opening auditions to people with disabilities, trying to find places like the Shepherd Center in Atlanta has tons of people there with disabilities, like putting up flyers there, just somebody being inspired, seeing a flyer to change somebody's life. But that's all I want to say. I'm sorry, I don't want to take too much time.
Oh no, please don't ever be sorry for taking up space and setting down your boundaries. I don't know if it's been clear, but I'm so follow the spirit, say what you got to say, and we will adjust accordingly. So if either the three of you have anything else to let us know. Well, me, but future.
Cool. Just enjoy life. Right. Do what you can. Tap into your joy. Wake up every day and realize that you can contribute that day to something. And one thing that I've had, and I'm going to try not to get emotional, but one thing that has been drilled in my head over the last 5 years, because I have a ton of self-doubt, is just do the work. Just do the work, and you will be amazed the people that you draw to you who will love you, support you, and honor you. So just do the doggone work. You don't need the money. You don't need to know a certain person. Just do the doggone work.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you all. Like I said earlier. Oh, wait, David, I think I saw your hand. Did I?
Nope. I was just clapping. I was clapping for Rebecca.
Yes. Thank you all once again so much. Corey, thank you for running all of the behind the scenes things that I don't know how to run. And thank you for everyone who is listening. I will see you all next Wednesday, once again, 6 p.m. Eastern time for families in theater, because, theater has this stigma as well about if you have a family and you want to do a show, it's either or. It cannot be both. So I will see you all next Wednesday for that conversation. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. It was good seeing you.